A big hello to you, it's so great to see you, and I do hope that you are well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to Weir Yard, and today we're going to be taking a look at another recent Accurascale release. We did the 16-ton mineral wagons last time, and they were really quite impressive. But this time it's the turn of coaching stock, and Accurascale very kindly, at the same time they sent over the samples of the 16-ton minerals, they sent some of the new suburban coaches. These are the humble siblings of the Mark I corridor coaches, which are a staple of so many different layouts, incredibly long lasting. Some of those coaches are still in use today. But the Mark I suburban coach had a little bit more of a humble beginning. Starting to be built in 1954, they were very much a lower priority, and arguably when they were replacing coaching stock that wasn't really all that old in a lot of cases, they were sort of a solution looking for a problem. But for anybody who has ridden one of these at preserved railways, you'll find them to be very, very comfortable indeed. And certainly when the Cupboard Monkey and I took a trip on one on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, I was struck by just how comfortable they were. Added to that, the privacy of having effectively a door-to-door compartment to yourself with no corridor access, it really was a great way to enjoy a ride on the rails. Yeah, no, this is great. We've got our own little compartment. This is something actually that's missing from modern rail travel. They try and dress up the idea of all these pendolinos as being really comfy and modern and great. But the honest truth is, I'd rather be sat in a compartment in an SK coach, just like we got here in old Mark I, with the bouncy seats. I'm not sure that commuters back in the 50s, 60s and 70s might have agreed, but certainly these are a welcome stopgap in the range of coaches that are available to the ready-to-run modeller. Unlike the 1993 vintage Bachmann coaches that they are effectively a replacement for, Accurascale have tooled up for pretty much every version, whereas before we only had two. There are at least 5 different versions that Accurascale has brought to the market, and this level of variety is something which I think is great to see. But they have a few other tricks up their sleeve, including a lighting that comes with them as standard that works on both DC and DCC, and both users can enjoy being able to turn them on and off with the use of a magnetic wand, so there's no little dip switches underneath to mess about with, and that really is a great boon. And believe me, when you see it, that coach lighting is something special. Now you might think, well, coach lighting, what a bit of a gimmick, but in this case you'd be totally wrong. We seem to be getting coaches coming through now from manufacturers that have fully modelled interiors. You might think, well, that's a bit silly, nobody's going to see those, but that's where you'd be wrong. In the case of these coaches, the internal lighting allows you to see an interior that is truly exquisite. Come with me and let's take a good close look at the Accurascale Mark I Suburbans. If you really like what you see, we do have an affiliate link down below taking you to TMC, the Model Centre, where you can find all the different versions that are available. We've also got a link direct to Accurascale 2, where you can check the ones that they have for sale. And certainly, whilst they do seem to be a little bit on the expensive side when it comes to coaching stock, I'm sure you'll agree that you do get what you pay for, and in this case you get an awful lot. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel and check us out over on Patreon. But for now, let's get on and take a close look and see just what is on offer from Accurascale for the 57-foot Suburbans. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double-O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
One of the recent new releases from Accurascale are their range of Mark I suburban coaches, and these in many ways are the unsung heroes of the Mark I range, with the corridor coaches getting a lot of the attention, not least because they survived far longer and are more likely to be the ones that you would ride on preserved railways, but nonetheless there are a number of areas where very intensive commuter services, coupled with sharper curves and much more limited clearances, that meant that the 57-foot 11-inch wheelbase Mark I Suburbans were needed to replace the assortment of pre-grouping stock. In many respects, it was quite interesting that BR chose to spend so much money on these, because there was a wealth of, in some cases, some quite recently built Big Four company rolling stock that was actually doing the job very well and would probably have lasted for some time to come, but nonetheless BR pushed on and instituted the suburban coach building scheme. They were given a lower priority than the mainline corridor stock, so construction didn't begin until around 1954, giving a reprieve to some of those pre-grouping commuter coaches. However, the Suburbans did have a few shortcomings, and not least in the services that were running into King's Cross that were formed of quad art sets of LNER origin. The resulting new formations actually resulted in a significant reduction in the number of seats available, which can't have proved very popular during rush hour, although with the lengths of the trains probably being around the same, it has to be said that those people who could get on these trains and get a seat were probably presented with a much roomier experience. There were 6 different types of coaches that were produced, which ranged from composites, third open, but also composites with a lavatory, third with a lavatory, and then there were the all thirds, and last but not least, the brake thirds. Later on, as British Railways completely abolished third class and made it just the standard class, then these were recoded, but the coaches themselves never changed. They did feature a few innovative details, no doubt inspired by some of the coaches that they replaced, which included a series of pictures on the walls of compartments, with 3 on one side and 2 on the other, coupled with a mirror that would allow the more image-conscious passenger to actually make use of that on their commutes to and from work. These pictures were commissioned from renowned artists of the BR period and were certainly something that would have brightened up the interiors in a similar vein to those pictures which the LNER furnished the quad arts with. Now, Accurascale has brought out all 6 of the different types of coaches and have very kindly sent over 3 to the channel for us to review, and these give a good cross-section of some of the more commonly used examples, but all 6 different versions are available and in a multitude of different liveries to suit all the different periods that these coaches ran in. There were very early withdrawals as DMUs muscled in on the scene and took over, although on the lines that they're probably most familiar for, in and out of the hotel curve at King's Cross and the Farringdon lines, they remained loco-hauled for various reasons right through until a final reprieve of 10 months saw them finally withdrawn in 1977. The first one we've got here is catalogue number ACC2360, and this is coach E48009, and this is in the latest livery that these carried in the all-over rail blue. If anybody's wondering, they didn't last long enough to get blue-grey, although a small number did manage to pass on into departmental use, primarily the brake thirds, and some of these were used as temporary brake coaches for Freightliner container trains, and two even managed to last long enough to be used as tool vans on breakdown trains and were painted in the quite attractive yellow with black chevron design, which is probably one of the reasons that these are fairly well represented in preservation. The other examples that have been sent over include catalogue number ACC2349. This is the brake second, obviously one of the more important coaches for the train. In many services there would have been two of these to allow for a brake compartment at either end of the train. The final coach is catalogue number ACC2361, and this is coach identity E46101. This is actually listed as being Rail Blue Era 6. Quite interested to see what the difference might be on that. Although with the E prefix, these are probably coaches that were withdrawn earlier than the ones which lasted the longest. I'm going to start off with the second lavatory open. That's what the SLO stands for, and it comes in a really good solid Accurascale box with line art of the coach inside on the box front, and these are actually specific to the coach within, and you can see there the toilet window in the centre of these coaches. Now BR did produce quite a few hundred of these, so presumably had visions that these would be reasonably long-lasting, although as it happened their lifespan was severely curtailed by a step change in motive power being utilised particularly on the commuter lines of the capital. The models come with a very comprehensive booklet. This is A4 sized, although quite folded to fit in the box, and we get a potted history of the coaches on the front here, and it is quite an interesting read, although one item of information that isn't included is just actually how many have passed on into preservation, although it is easy to look up the various railways that have these running in preservation. 596 of these short-framed Mark 1s were produced. The history does continue over the page with a number of really quite nice photographs, and you can see why Accurascale has chosen these as their a perfect accompaniment to their Class 31 locomotives. I do wonder sometimes whether there's a little sneak hint at maybe some of the locomotives that Accurascale might be considering for future releases, and certainly the N2 would be a welcome addition, hint hint.
I need to see him now! Now!
We also then get exploded diagrams of all of the different types of coaches. Each of these pamphlets include details of all the different versions, and it just goes to show how many different parts go into these really quite fine detailed coaches. We also get a page which gives a handy representation of all of the different versions available and the coach running numbers too, and this is particularly useful for the collectors of the future who might be interested in seeing what they can search out and pick up. For me, the highlight of the range is the departmental tool van, although I am told that these did prove incredibly popular and were completely sold out very, very quickly indeed. Other liveries available are the Rail Blue, as in these examples that have been sent, the Carmine livery, which was the original livery, and then we've also got the later Maroon livery, which was inspired by the LMS Crimson Lake. It is interesting inside. We've got this overhead warning flash. It really does make it quite distinctive, and it says, "You must read the instructions on the reverse of this card before detailing the inside of your model." So here we have some information about getting inside, and some of these actually just have a magnetically fitted roof, but others, due to roof detail, we've got 6 clips that need to be sprung to get inside if, for example, you want to add passengers. They do feature coach lighting as well. There's a lot of features going on with these. Getting the clamshell out of the bottom part of the box, I must admit though, is a little bit tricky. It is an incredibly tight fit with nothing much to grab onto. There we go, we've got that clear. I should also note that hidden away at the top here we've got some separately applicable detail. This is in case the end user wishes to add some of the vacuum pipes, and we've also got the couplings, although I suspect that it's simply a case of either or with these over the slimline tension locks. We've also got some clear solid bars for coupling coaches together, and these would allow for pretty reliable formation of these into prototypically accurate sets, and it seems that Accurascale have gone for a clear plastic to make them somewhat less obtrusive. It is a very interesting idea, and certainly we'll take a look at those. They also include a magnetic wand, and this is for enabling and disabling the interior lighting, and it's an interesting way that whilst the train is running you can turn the lighting on, and then when it's in a siding you can turn it off. It's really good to see that they've very quickly, manufacturers in general, have done away with needing decoders in coaches to achieve this, which does always seem rather expensive and wasteful. Removing the coach from the clamshell, it's very apparent that there's a decent amount of weight to these. Comparing them with the coaches that they replace on the market, the Bachmann Mark ones, you can definitely feel that there is a big difference in weight between these two. Roof detail is really quite fine. You can see up on the top here we've got these torpedo style ventilators. These are all separately applied. And then what I really do like on this one, we've got the toilet compartment. It's a version of the Mark 1 suburban coach that's never been offered ready to run before, as far as I know. We've also got some of these very, very subtle vents, and you can see there they're separately applied wire and do look very fine indeed. These, I'm guessing, would have been the breather pipes for the water tanks, so that as people flushed it out it would draw air in through these, but by being hooked over it would stop things like rainwater being able to get in and any other such pollutants. We have 3 of these which are marched across the top of the roof. And then we've got these additional pipes here, which I suspect are water pipes for the toilet cistern system. And you can see that these go to the single point in the roof and then stretch out. They're fitted very much in the same vein as the handrails on locomotives are. These go out and then spread out down one each side of the end of the coaches. We've got maintenance access steps up one side, and the pipe itself would also provide a dual use as being a kind of handrail for any staff that needed to go up there. We've got the overhead warning flashes, and these are a particular fine printing. We've got separately fitted, feels like possibly brass, although there's a bit of a spring to them. They are pretty strong. Lamp holders, 2 of those, plus again, these are all separately fitted parts. You can feel the spring on each and every one of these. There's a lot of extra added detail, and also the printing on here as well. King's Cross outer sub, the A, and indeed some more printing much further down, which I can't even read on the camera viewfinder, but I'm sure under close magnification will prove to be really quite legible. What did interest me is that the underframes on these coaches are in a kind of a brown colour rather than what I would have expected, a black. Accurascale have definitely done their research, and I can't imagine that these underframes would have been moulded in brown just for the sake of it. They have had extensive access to preserved examples of these coaches, and it may well be that the underframes were painted brown and then very quickly became black and oily in service, not least in some of the London tunnels, subjected to quite a bit of pollution from initially the steam steam locomotives that pulled these, and then later on the diesel locomotives, which often weren't that much cleaner when you had to breathe the fumes. Looking across the sides of these coach, the metal sides finished in the rail blue really are done quite well. The colour of the blue is really quite nice. We have this satin finish. It's not a high gloss, and I think that they've chosen the colour of this absolutely perfect, contrasting with the kind of dark slate grey of the roof, which does have quite a shine to it. Very quickly these would have been dulled down with soot and muck, and indeed even in the photographs in the pamphlet that comes with these coaches you can see that the roofs very quickly looked quite washed out, and a slight run over with weathering, such as with an airbrush or even with powders, would certainly dull that down and improve the look of these coaches, although out of the box they do look quite good, pristine clean. Each of the compartment handrails, not just the actual door handle but the handrails alongside those, are separately fitted items, and they're really quite well on there. There's no risk of any of these coming free. It's always a worry when we get more and more detail that it increases the fragility, but actually there's no risk of that down here. The glazing is reasonably flush, but you can see the slightly prismatic effect of the slightly thicker glazing that's just a practicality of production. We've also got some labels on the windows, and these would have included no smoking compartments and such like. Looking inside these coaches, you can see a hint of some of those pictures that we talked about in the introduction on the walls of the compartments. It's very difficult to see what they are on this particular one, but I'm looking forward to the magnetically sealed roofs that will hopefully give quite a good access to the inside to take a closer look. The seating is in the form of these bench seats that go all the way across at the ends, but because this has access throughout to get to the toilet compartment, we actually have a kind of doorway through in the centre for each of the compartments. It's not a corridor. You would have kind of had to have just made your way down through each compartment, but it did mean that there was access to everybody on the coach for the toilet area itself. On the other side of the toilet, we've got again another 4 sets of compartments with the way through, and I believe the seating on these was 3 plus 3, with 1 seat less per bench seat due to the way through down the middle. Looking to the other end of the coach, this is something more Spartan compared to the end that had the access steps, and you can see this very flat construction. When you're very used to coaches having gangways, this is a very peculiar look, but absolutely prototypically accurate. Again, we've got all the fine printing, we've got these additional metal handrails up the side and additional parts across there. Everything again separately applied, really fine printing with the King's Cross outer sub and more printing further down. We've got sprung loaded buffers on these. They do feel to be a little bit stiff, and you can see that one there that is kind of sticking in the shank, but to be honest, not got a problem with that. These are certainly super fine with a nice prototypically thin buffer face. These feel like they're made from metal, finished in black. Looking to some of the printing on the side of the coach, we've got the E48009, very crisp indeed. And looking to the toilet compartment, we've got the very necessary ventilator on the middle of the window, and we've got the glazing with the 2 top light windows and the bigger bottom one replicated on this really quite well. Now I'm going to turn now to the underside, and this is a massive wealth of detail, and this is one where actually, whilst these aren't exactly the same coaches, I am going to break with tradition and compare this to the Bachmann model, which I believe has been on the market since 1993, so quite long overdue. It's a quantum leap from old Bachmann at the top to the new Accurascale on the bottom, and you can see whilst there's a suggestion of some of the components on the Bachmann model, it's well, very crude by comparison. The bogie design, you can see that we've got a lot of separately fitted parts with the primary and secondary suspension, stretcher bars between the axle boxes. The wheels look a little bit odd in black. They are completely chemically blackened metal wheels, but completely black, which is an interesting look. And certainly I think these coaches would benefit from a light weathering. On the underside, it really is a quantum leap. We've got self-centering, kinematic style slimline tension locks. These fit into a pocket that's just there, which does allow them to be changed out quite readily for alternative couplings if that's what you wish to use. All of the braking and indeed the structure of the bogie is completely replicated, and it's fastened on quite conveniently with this single screw in the middle, which would make changing the bogies should you need to, or to take them off to gain access perhaps to adjust the kinematic, or to remove it altogether if you're going for a slightly more adventurous way of coupling these together. It is quite easy and possible. The brake rigging goes all the way through to the vacuum cylinders, which you can see here, and we've got some really quite nice slender rigging on here leading into the central frame of the coach. Everything about this is really quite slender. It's perfectly done and actually quite strong. It appears to be moulded in a somewhat rigid but still with a little bit of spring to it in case of knocks plastic, and that does seem to work quite well, giving it a lot of strength. We've got the dynamo here. We've talked about these on some of the other releases. It's a way that the electric power was provided to the coaches with a band that went from the coach axle up to the dynamo, and this would provide power whilst the train was moving, and then batteries in these battery boxes would store the surplus power so that the coach would still be lit up when in stations. I really love all of this extra brake rigging. You can see all of this quite complex pipework underneath, and it really is nicely realised. We've also got what I can only assume would perhaps be a tripcock for the braking system, finished in this very eye-catching orangey red. There is some printing on the chassis there, but again, I can't read it with my naked eye. Finishing off the coach, we've got these nice springy but strong footsteps on the end, which would have allowed crew to climb up from track level. And the buffer beams are finished off with a really quite strong metal hook, which is factory fitted, which does avoid the risk of having a big hole in the buffer beam unless you fit extra details. Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. The next one up is the brake second. Now this is one I can do a direct comparison with the older Bachmann model, and again we've got the line art on the top of the box which shows the coach within. One thing I would suggest is actually on these models, if you're getting a fleet of these, you only really need to unpack and retain one of the wands. Each coach comes with their own, but you could just use the one wand to deal with all of the coaches in your fleet. Now this particular coach, we've got the brake second. Originally these were brake third, but then with the reorganisation which I mentioned in the intro, third class became second or standard. It was very much a paper exercise, to be honest. The actual interiors of the coaches didn't actually change. We've got a guards compartment at the back with the double doors, and we've also got some bars on the window. Now this wasn't a security feature so much as these were on the inside, and would have meant that if you had things like brute trolleys which could have broken free in transit if they weren't secured properly, this would stop the window from being smashed from the inside by things banging against it. we've got the guard's door, which leads into the guard's compartment. We've got a brake standard in there as well. And I'm just going on this to see if we can remove the roof, held on by magnets. Actually, that is surprisingly easy to do. The magnets are quite strong, so you're not going to run the risk of that roof falling off in everyday usage. But you can get it off when you need to, and that reveals the full interior of this coach. We've got a lighting circuit across the top. If you need to remove this, it's held in place by a screw at each end. And then we've got a capacitor here, which will avoid the lights from flickering when they're running, and also provide a kind of a stay alive type capacitor to ensure that you get a nice consistent light from the coach lighting. Looking down the internal compartments, you can see here we've got the large open area at the back. I do like the insides being finished with this kind of red flooring and then the cream sides. We've got this ladder, and I believe that originally there was a kind of a periscope that the guard could make use of to look down the train, although this was later dispensed with. We can see a kind of bucket seat that the guard had, which I'm guessing would have allowed him to swivel round and be able to access all of the brake valve equipment on the bulkhead of the coach. There's a lot of separate detail in there, and with the roof off we can actually enjoy all of this. There's some really quite intricate printing. We've got valves and such like, and the brake standard in the centre. Moving into each of the coach compartments, you can see that we've got the luggage racks. These were a very, very obvious feature when I rode on one of these on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. These were very, very obvious. Now, this particular coach doesn't have the way through down the middle, so the guard would have stayed very firmly in this compartment. He simply could not access the rest of the coach, which gave a huge degree of privacy to each of these compartments, which did make them quite popular. The bench seats have quite a pleasing ergonomic shape to them. You can just make out some of the imagery on the bulkheads. It's really difficult to pick up with the camera, but it's very visible with the naked eye. And it looks to be that we've got the same images in each of these compartments. If we look down the other way, we've got those mirrors just in the centre. And it really is a superb effort. And again, the weight on this coach is immense, and it really does feel quite sturdy. There's no twisting, the sides don't flap about. Everything about this is a really pleasingly sturdy construction. The roof itself, it just snaps back on there. That's such a pleasing mechanism that they've come up with. On the roof, again, this is different from the previous one that I showed you. Each of these is tooled accurately with the pattern of torpedo vents. And we've also got those additional panels, which I think may have been originally for the periscopes for the guard that were later removed. Down the side, separately fitted door handles, side handles too. The glazing, again, it's completely flush to the side, but you do get a slight prismatic effect. And then we've got these additional markers on the side. What's interesting is we've got a ladies only compartment. Now, this one at the end, which is also right next to the guard. So I know from experience, when you're in these, you may not be able to access the compartment next to you, but you can certainly hear what's going on quite clearly. So it would have meant that the guard would have always been able to hear and make sure that nothing untoward was happening in the ladies compartment, which also has the no smoking marking there. Some of the other compartments are also no smoking, but it's very easy to forget in these days where smoking has been all but outlawed in anywhere other than open streets or the comfort of your own home, that smoking was very prevalent. And we've got 3 more compartments here which are completely free to be smoked in, which would have probably made them very yellow and nicotine-y and smelly, very much like a working man's club that I remember from my youth. Printing on the coach number E48009, again, really crisp and sharp. I'm going to look to the coach ends here. We've got, at this end, we've got the printing, crisp, sharp, really nicely realised. And I'm just going to compare that with the end of the lavatory open. You can see there are some detail differences between these. The lavatory open has this extra handrail. On the brake open, just the one handrail, and these are tooled up for each application so we don't get those bullet holes in the side, which is really nice to see. Again, we've got all of the similar underframe detail. I'm just going to compare these. Let me get this the right way round. It does appear that the underframes are common between certainly these two coaches. Looking at that, all of the pipework goes in the same locations. It really is a wealth of detail because we've got a direct comparison between the Bachmann Suburban and the new Accurascale one. The Accurascale one is just a few millimeters longer, and I've got every reason to believe that the Accurascale model is the more accurate of the two, but they are fairly close. In terms of looking at the underframe detail, it's very apparent the crude nature on the Bachmann one, but it was very good for its time. Let's not just bash a model for the sake of it. We've got the correct number of doors, correct printing on the windows, but it's very apparent that the older Bachmann model doesn't feature flush glazing. It's got like a solid insert that does all the windows and gives them this very recessed look. The roof too is much finer detail you can see across the top, although there's been quite a lot of debate about should they have ribs, should they not have ribs, and the truth was that these were butt welded on jigs, and that meant that there were seams, but they weren't raised seams like this. I'd say that I prefer the Accurascale rendition. We've got no seams whatsoever. What you would have actually seen, if anything at all, would have been the slight distortion of the weld lines and nothing else. The final coach is the second or third, depending on which period it's from. And it is interesting, on the box this says Era 6 rather than Era 7. So I'm just a little bit curious whether there's any noticeable difference on this in terms of the detailing or even just printing on the coach itself. Again, these are a little bit tricky just to get the clamshell out of the box. Not really a massive complaint. Again, we've got the removable roof. I do love this feature. In terms of innovation, that is really up there. We've got different colour seats in this. We've got this more maroon finish, and I'm guessing that would be in keeping with the period. So upholstery on these coaches would probably have been recovered probably every 5-6 years or so, maybe even sooner if damage occurred. So it did stand to reason with the changing of the times that some of the seat colours would change as well.
Jen, you have literally ridden on red and blue seated versions of this coach.
Now I'm just looking at some of the decoration inside the compartments, and it does feel that we've got some slightly different pictures in here. I think what we're looking at is we've got certainly these last two compartments. We've got some interesting pictures, but they differ. Further down, we don't have those in the centre compartments, and then they're back at the end ones. And actually, I like this. It gives a bit of variety. We've got the silver-coloured baggage racks in this one, and the full bench seat across the full width of each of these. Again, we've got that coach lighting. It's really nice to see that this is coming as standard. Once upon a time, you would have had to have paid extra for coach lighting and fitted it all yourself. But this is all in place and wired in to pickups that are on the bogies. Now, in terms of the roof, I don't think it matters which way round this goes. I'm going to try and fit that the wrong way round, and it does go on. So I say wrong way round, it looks as though the roof is identical regardless of which way round, and it does very pleasingly self-locate with those magnets, which is really quite nice to see. The guttering along the side is quite crisp. Actually, one of the things I've not pointed out on the previous coaches, the guttering at the end, you can see it protrude and curve down as per the prototype. The ends of this coach, we've got, again, we're back to the dual handrails and the printing on here. This one says O. We've got, again, the printing down at the bottom, the lamp irons, the overhead warning flash, which we get a single one on this particular example. On the brake third there, we've got the double warning flash and double warning flash for the lavatory open. And I do wonder, actually turning that around, it's a single one as well. Maybe that is one of the subtle differences between Era 6 and Era 7. Although they do run quite well together, not all coaches would have been overhauled at the same time, and that would mean that you can quite happily mix Era 6 and Era 7, and quite possibly as well mix the maroon with the rail blue starting to appear from the late 1960s, running through to the final examples being withdrawn in 1977. So there's always an overlap period, and there are some quite nice period photographs which show mixes of different coach liveries, and it's something which you don't often see done in model form, where everything is perfect and corporate, but the reality was never quite that straightforward. Again, all that separately fitted detail is on there, and really crisp and sharp printing, the E48101, and the underframe detail. All the underframes appear to be exactly the same on these, but definitely a wealth of detail, and these bogies in particular are a work of art. Kinematic couplings again, and really there's just nothing that I can point to and go, oh, that's wrong. I think if I was going to criticise anything, the slight prismatic effect that you get on some of the windows, but that really is the most minor of niggles. From most viewing distances, you're just not going to see that. When it comes to running on Weir Yard, the coaches performed really well. They got through all of the complicated track work, including double slips, without any issues whatsoever. I particularly liked the internal lighting. It really does add quite a bit. We've got a fully detailed interior, and the lighting shows it off incredibly well. Even when the coaches are on the layout and running, this does provide some really good views of the interior, and a lot of that extra detail does stand out, particularly when running through cuttings and also in and out of the tunnels. It really comes to life, casting a very prototypical glow over the sides of the cutting and the insides of the tunnel. And I do think that this is a great feature that has been added to these coaches. That lighting is completely flicker free, and as you can see, when you actually pick one of these coaches up, the lighting actually stays lit for a very long time. I actually gave up after 40 seconds. It was starting to dim, but certainly not going out, and that means that even over Insulfrog points and such like, you will get no flickering whatsoever from these coaches. It really is a superb setup. The only area where I could gripe a little bit is that there was a tiny bit of a squeal from a couple of the coaches as they went along. It's not really that noticeable, but you could hear it, and I think that this is a function of the pinpoint pickups that collect the current for that internal coach lighting. These come from a bar that's inset in each of the bogies, and the pinpoints of the wheels turn within these. It does mean that you've got quite a nice metal bearing surface, but it does seem to just make a bit of a noise as it runs round. There is a slight drag too, and I think that this would go away with a tiny drop of oil and running in, but they do feel to have a little bit more rolling resistance than some other coaches that I have in my fleet. But we're really splitting hairs here, and overall the performance was incredibly good. One thing that I do have to say about these is, as they were running around Weir Yard, I was struck by just how much better they are than those old Bachmann Suburbans that they effectively completely replace. Unlike when we did the review of the 16-ton mineral wagons, where I was quite happy that these would sit alongside their predecessors without looking too out of place, these Suburbans quite literally eclipse the competition, and I found myself quietly taking those old Bachmann stalwarts off the track and making preparations to pass them on to pastures new. It's been a long time since a new model arrived on the scene that made me immediately think that I needed to get rid of all the old examples in my fleet. I'm not upset at that. These really do bring things on quite a lot. There's so much to look at. They are a work of art, and they're incredibly well built. Those internal transverse bulkheads go a long way to making them feel very sturdy and very robust, and I do particularly like that magnetic clip-on roof that gives you some really easy access to the interior if you want to fit in passengers. But it doesn't feel flimsy in any way. I think everything about these coaches does feel substantial and well built, and I'm very, very pleased with the results that Accurascale have been able to achieve. When it comes to RRP on these coaches, we're looking at them available across the board for just a shade under £65. And there's good availability for most of the liveries, although as I said towards the beginning of this review, some of those really quite eye-catching departmental ones have already sold out. You might think that's quite expensive for a coach, but when you compare it to some of the new releases that have full lit interiors that have been coming through from various manufacturers, it does seem to be a pretty reasonable price for what you get, which is an incredibly well built, robust and accurate coach. I really do like some of the graphics on the interior, and that interior lighting, which is as standard with all of these coaches, does make the most of that. You can look through the windows and it just keeps on giving. The more you look, the more there is to see. When it comes to the lighting, you can see that really quite bright inside there. Not excessively bright, there's no bleed through the body, but they do show off that wonderful interior. And now with the aid of the wand, we can just find the right place on the coach and they just turn out and go back and they turn back on. Really couldn't be simpler. They also feature a stay alive. I've just turned my layout off and you can see that they stay on for a very long time. This will ensure that actually you'll get a complete flicker-free experience. And they're still on after well over 20 seconds. They are starting to go dim now. Over 30 seconds. And they just slowly dim away. So we turn now to the scores, and first up is build quality, and these have held up incredibly well underneath a lot of prodding and poking throughout this review. Not a single piece of detail has come loose or fallen off, and even some of the more fragile looking parts such as door handles and those vents up on the roof above the lavatory compartment have really stood up incredibly well. I also like the attention to detail of some of the materials being used, with a springy plastic that's still really robust for some of these slender parts, so there is no compromise on the prototypical thickness, and they match really well with photographs of the full-size vehicles. The brown underframe is a little bit odd looking to my eyes. I think we've become quite used to black underframes on everything, but when talking with Accurascale they said that this is the prototypical colour, and it may well be that a lot of the photographs online, which are ambiguous at best, are shown with an awful lot of build-up of grime that would make them darken and darken and darken in use, and you can't imagine that the underframes would have been a high priority for being cleaned at regular intervals. Everything about these, including the way that the roofs clip on firmly but effectively first time every time, and the really quite exquisite interiors, is perfect, and really there is no other score than 10 out of 10 for what is an incredible well-made coach. Next up we've got running quality, and again these coaches performed really well. There was no problems with any kind of derailments. They just sailed through all of the point work, including some of the more problematic twists and turns, double slips and scissor crossings, and really there was no issues whatsoever. There's no flicker from the lighting thanks to the innovative design which has capacitors on there to ensure that there's no interruption with the power. Even whilst doing the scores here, the lights in these coach are still on, albeit very dimly, and that is testament to just how much power these store. The manner with which you turn them on and off as well is delightfully simple with a magnetic wand, which means you don't have to take these off the track and look for little dip switches that would easily get damaged. You can quite honestly just form these up into a nice rake and leave them be, whether you want lights on or off. The only area where I really had some issues was that squealing from some of the wheels. I think this is because we've got dry metal on metal from the factory, and there was a slight crunchiness that I noted. These chemically darkened wheels did seem a little bit prone to picking up tiny grains of dirt. It didn't affect any of the running or the electrical pickups, but it did make them almost rumble around the layouts. It wasn't really all that noticeable, but it was there. The only other area of mild concern was that there was a degree of rolling resistance. I put this down to all of the detail parts, such as the brake shoes, which are very close to the wheel treads, in some case appearing to touch ever so slightly. And you may find that a very long train of these could tax some of your lighter locomotives. And I'm going to give this an 8.6. On DCC fitting and innovation, well, this is another area that these coaches absolutely shine. Taking the roof off, you can see that incredible interior. We've got seating that's more than just a crude piece of plastic. It's actually got shape to it. It looks like cushions. We've got the luggage racks right up at the top, and we've got all those pictures and other such parts on the bulkheads between the compartments. The interior of the coach is finished in appropriate colours, and this means that even though we've got a decent level of lighting, there's no bleed through whatsoever. With the pickups hidden away on the pinpoints of the axles, it really is a neat affair. We've got so much in the way of underframe detail. These are one of the most exquisite coaches that I've seen ready to run yet. And all in all, there is absolutely nothing that I can fault in this area. I'm going to give them, again, the full 10 out of 10. Next up is accuracy and quality of finish, and when it comes to accuracy, these really are perfect. There doesn't seem to be anything that you can point at and really obviously say they got that wrong. They've got prototype photographs in the paperwork that come with these, and everything that I could see did match up really well. They seem to as well be pretty much the correct length, unlike the older coaches that they are very clearly a head and shoulders successor to. And really there was just nothing that I could say that drew my attention that was wrong. The only area on the finish which stood out a little bit for me was the windows. Now we do have flush glazing, which is a great upgrade on these coaches, and they look so much better for not having windows recessed right back in. But the plastic used is quite thick, and it's possible to see the edges. They have this kind of prismatic effect because of the thickness of the material used. I'm not convinced that there would be any other logical way that they could do them and keep the prices reasonable. So it is one of those necessities of compromise, but it's the only one I can find, and I'm going to give these a 9.1. On value for money, we've got a price of just a shade under £65, and this seems to be the same across the board. Whilst you might think that that's quite expensive for coaches, it is very much in the ballpark of coaches of this quality, and there are a lot which come in retailing for significantly more besides. So actually it is a pretty favourable price in today's market for what you get, which is a very substantial coach with an interior that is a joy to look at. I just keep finding myself taking the roof off and looking down into the seating area, and there's so many differences between each of these different coaches that it's a joy but to behold. So I'm going to give this an 8.9, and that gives us a final score of 46.6. So there you go, that is the Accurascale 57-foot suburban coaches, and I must admit that there's not often a new model that is released to replace one that's already on the market that really kind of makes me think, you know what, I just want to replace everything that I've got. But these Accurascale Suburbans are definitely in that category. I think the only other thing which has been released that made me just get rid of all of my previous versions was the Bachmann 03 Shunter, whereby the previous offering just was just toy-like by comparison. And that's kind of what, for me, these Accurascale Suburbans have done. They've brought a level of quality that just eclipses some of those older coaches. Now, those older coaches, let's not trash talk these models. They're still definitely going to be a good source of coaching stock for those people on a budget. And actually, in some respects, for those people who don't have the kind of money to spend on their hobby that some of the rest of us do, the Accurascale coaches might actually help, because they'll depress the price second-hand of those Bachmann coaches as people do pretty much what I'm about to do, which is get rid of my entire fleet of those and replace them with Accurascales. And so I think this is a win-win situation for pretty much everybody. We've got a link down below taking you to both TMC, the Model Centre, and also to Accurascale to find all the different versions of these coaches. But I do want to hear from you in the comments section. I know quite a few of you have probably already got your own versions of these coaches, and I want to know what your opinion is. It's really important. You know, you've got an opinion, and if you've actually gone out and bought these coaches, I want to hear what you think about them, and if you're currently trying to make a decision over whether this is something for you, then do check out the comments, see what people have to say. Don't take my word for it, see what other modelers have thought of these coaches. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying it's been an absolute pleasure to entertain you, and please hit that like button, consider sharing the video, and subscribe to the channel too if you haven't already done so, to be the first to see new videos as and when they come up. But till then, you take great care, and happy modelling. That's always very important. It's a hobby, it's supposed to be enjoyable, so make sure you're having a good time. Until next time, take care. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCT decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model OO gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest logo.
Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/JenniferKirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.